All right, let's talk about something that is, frankly, terrifying for anyone who's ever had a job. Getting fired with cause. It's this phrase that employers use that makes you feel like you've done something terribly wrong and you're about to walk away with absolutely nothing. But what if I told you that in Ontario, that's usually not how it works at all?
So you get that letter, and your heart just sinks, right? You see the words "for cause," and immediately your mind goes to the worst-case scenario. No notice pay, no severance, nothing. It's a totally normal fear. But the truth is, in so many of these cases, that fear is completely unfounded.
First things first, we need to bust a huge myth. There's this idea out there, and it's super common, that if you make any kind of serious mistake, your boss can just point to the door and legally owes you, well, zip.
And this idea of just cause feels kind of intuitive. It makes sense on the surface, but this common belief is something employers often count on. The legal reality, especially here in Ontario, is way, way more complex. And honestly, it's much more in your corner than you'd ever guess.
Okay, so let's get right into the nitty-gritty. For an employer to legally deny you even your most basic termination pay, they don't just have to be upset with you. They have to prove something very, very specific, and the bar for that proof is set incredibly high by the law. This is where things get really important. You see, there's the general idea of just cause, which is a broad term. But then there's the legal standard under Ontario's Employment Standards Act, the ESA. And believe me, they are not the same thing. The ESA standard is way stricter, and that's the one that counts for your minimum pay.
The ESA uses this very precise term, willful misconduct. It doesn't mean you had a bad day or made a mistake. A big court case, Render versus ThyssenKrupp, clarified this. It means you had to have done something intentionally, on purpose, knowing it was wrong, and pretty much knowing what the bad result would be. It's a huge difference.
And this is so crucial to understand. The law basically carves out all the normal human stuff. Making an honest mistake, not willful misconduct. Showing poor judgment, still not it. Even just being bad at your job, that's almost never going to be enough. The law is looking for something much more serious and deliberate.
Now you're probably thinking, hang on, I signed a contract, and it said they could fire me for just cause. Okay, but what if I told you that a single court ruling likely made that entire part of your contract totally useless for your employer? Get a load of this sentence. It comes from a game-changing case called Waxdale versus Swagon, and I am not exaggerating when I say this one line sent an absolute shockwave through employment law in Ontario. It changed everything about how we look at contracts.
So here's how this tainting doctrine works. If your contract uses a vague term like just cause instead of the super strict willful misconduct, that clause is technically illegal. But here's the kicker. That one illegal clause doesn't just get ignored. It taints and poisons the entire termination section of your contract, throwing the whole thing out.
It really is the perfect analogy. One bad apple, one illegal clause, and the whole barrel is spoiled. And what that means is that thousands upon thousands of employment contracts all over Ontario, maybe even yours, suddenly have unenforceable termination clauses. This opens the door for you to get way, way more money.
But wait, there's more. Even if an employer is dead set on arguing they had cause, they have another massive hill to climb. You see, the law says the entire burden of proof is on them. It's not your job to prove you're innocent. It's their job to prove you were guilty of willful misconduct.
And this isn't just some legal theory, folks. It's written, black and white, right in the Employment Standards Act. So if you push back, your employer can't just make an accusation. They have to show up with cold, hard, compelling evidence to back it up.
And so often, employers just can't clear that hurdle. Maybe they don't have proof you did it on purpose, or they never gave you any written warnings. Or, and this happens a lot, as we saw in a case called Humphrey versus Mignat, they make the cause allegation, but as soon as a lawyer gets involved, they suddenly drop it because they know it won't stick.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. The bar for a cause firing is sky high, your employment contract is probably broken, and your boss has to prove everything. So what does this actually mean for your wallet? What are you owed if they can't make their case stick?
And here it is. This is the big takeaway. If an employer's for-cause reason gets tossed out by a court or they just can't prove it, it doesn't just disappear into thin air. It automatically flips and becomes a without-cause termination. And that means you are absolutely entitled to your notice or pay instead of notice. You don't get zero.
And the difference in what you could get is, well, it's huge. On the one hand, If your contract is somehow still valid, you get the bare minimums from the ESA. That's about 1 week of pay per year you worked, maxing out at 8 weeks. But if your contract is junk, thanks to Wakesdale, you could be entitled to common law notice. And that's often measured in months of pay, not weeks, based on your age, your job, and how long you were there. It can be a life-changing amount of money.
So, to break it down one last time, at the absolute minimum, you're owed termination pay. You might also get separate severance pay on top of that if you qualify. And then there's the big prize. If that contract is invalid, you could get a much, much larger payout based on common law notice.
So here's what I want you to walk away with. Never, ever just accept a for-cause termination at face value. That letter, it's not the final word. It's just their opening move. The law gives you a ton of protection, and the odds are way more in your favor than you think. The real question is, are you sure you're getting what you're legally owed?